Hello viewer, welcome for Business Studies Form 2 and we would like to get your feedback. In case you have any question on business, you can ask us through our SMS number 22518. You can also post your views or any question on our Facebook page Erimu TV, or even through our Twitter handle Erimu_KE. I'm going to be your teacher. I'm Margaret Wangari. Welcome, and today we shall be looking at our public limited company. We'll continue with where we left during our last lesson. But before that, we are going to first of all revisit our last lesson and see what you're supposed to do in the assignment that I left you to look at. And number one, you are supposed to give the characteristics of a public limited company. Give characteristics of a public limited company. So the characteristics include the following. One, it is formed by a minimum of 7 shareholders and no set maximum. Formed by a minimum of 7 shareholders and no set maximum. The other characteristic of a public limited company is that it cannot commence its operations before being issued with a certificate of trading. Remember, when you were discussing public limited companies, I told you that it cannot commence its operation before it is issued with this particular certificate. That is the certificate of trading. And remember, certificate of trading is issued after certificate of incorporation. It is issued after the certificate of incorporation. But remember, in the case of a private limited company, once it is issued with a certificate of incorporation, it can commence its activities. So that is not the case for a public limited company. The other characteristic is that it is managed by a board of directors. It is managed by a board of directors. And remember what I told you about private limited companies. It is managed by 1 or 2 directors. That one is a distinguishing. Is managed by a board of directors. We continue with the characteristics. And the other characteristic is that shares and debentures are freely transferable from one person to another. So when it comes to transferring of shares and debentures from one shareholder to another, that one is not restricted like the way it is in a private limited company. So, and remember, we also said that transferring of shares and debentures from one person to another does not affect the operations of the company, and therefore it is good to note that it is not restricted. That is in the case of a public limited company. The other characteristic of a public limited company is that it advertises and invites the public to subscribe for its shares and debentures. So a public limited company usually advertises its shares to the general public to come and subscribe shares and debentures of the amount that they want. So it is not restricted. For a public limited company, the public is open to go and subscribe for its shares and debentures. The other question is that you are supposed to give differences between a public limited company and partnership. That is, you distinguish or you come up with differences. You compare between a public limited company and a partnership. And one of the differences is that a public limited company is owned by shareholders, while a partnership is owned by partners. Number 2, public limited company is managed by a board of directors. And remember, in this one we said that it's like the shareholders are kind of alienated. They are alienated. So decisions are made by the board of directors that is appointed or that is voted for to manage the company. But in the case of partnership, you'll find that a partnership is usually managed by all partners. So all partners take part in the management of the partnership. And the other difference is that public limited company hire professionals to work for the company. Remember we said that a company usually get a lot of capital through because it invites the public to come and buy the shares. But in the case of partnership, you'll find that work is distributed among partners because they are not in a position to hire qualified professionals like it is the case for public limited company, because we are saying they have enough capital, that is in terms of finance, so they are in a position to hire qualified professionals because money is not a problem, which is not the case for a partnership. And find that in partnership they actually divide the work or distribute the work among the partners. And one maybe the other difference is that for a public limited company, death, insanity, or bankruptcy of a shareholder does not affect the continuity of a company. So just because a shareholder has died or has gone insane or has become bankrupt, the company cannot dissolve. So it will just continue, and that is what we mean when we say death, insanity, or bankruptcy does not affect its continuity. So anything that happens to a shareholder cannot make the company to dissolve. But in partnership, death, insanity, or bankruptcy of a partner leads to dissolution of a partnership. You'll find that in some cases, maybe after a death of a partner that is in partnership, the partnership is dissolved temporarily. But in case of bankruptcy, you find that the partnership is usually dissolved permanently. So death and insanity or bankruptcy of a partner leads to dissolution of a partnership. But in the case of a company, no, that does not affect the continuity of a company. Let's now look at the disadvantages, because I remember during our last lesson we looked at advantages of a public limited company, and therefore by the end of this lesson, as a runner, you are expected to be in a position to explain all disadvantages associated with a public limited company. And let's go directly to the disadvantages. And one of the disadvantages of a public limited company is that there is a very high cost of formation, or it requires a very high cost of formation. And this one starts from even the process of registering a public limited company. There is a very high cost that is incurred for a public limited company to be registered. So those costs includes legal costs, registration fees, and taxes. So all that makes the cost of formation to be very, very high. That is, if you compare a formation of a public limited company maybe with another business unit like a partnership, you'll find that forming a partnership is not as tiresome as that of forming a public limited company. So there are so many costs that come in or that are involved in the formation of a public limited company. The other disadvantage is that of legal restrictions, and you find that a public limited company must comply with so many legal requirements, which makes its operation inflexible and rigid. So when a company is being formed, that is a public limited company is being formed, it has to state and clearly state what type of a product you'll be producing, and therefore it has to adhere to that. So that makes its operation to be very inflexible and rigid, because the law is there that requires a public limited company to adhere to what it's supposed to do. So in case a company starts to operate, then along the way it finds it becomes a bit hard to produce that particular product maybe that is producing. It is not easier to change because the law does not allow that. So it has to adhere to what it had stated. And the other disadvantage is that of alienation of powers, and if they do not participate in the management of the side, they are put aside, they are not involved. That's why we are talking of alienation. They are usually alienated, and whoever manages the company is the board of directors. The board of directors manage the company. We continue with the disadvantages, and the other one is lack of secrecy. Lack of secrecy. This is because you find the public limited company to publish their end of year financial. So you find that this one puts the company in a position that is not able to keep its secrets. So this one is a disadvantage. The business is not in a position to keep their secrets. So you will also find still that a public limited company is required to submit its annual returns and accounts to the registrar of companies, and this one also denies it the benefit of keeping its affairs as a secret. So this law still requires the public limited company to submit their annual returns or the annual incomes and accounts to the registrar of the companies. And this also we are saying also denies the public limited company to keep its affairs as a secret. The other disadvantage is conflict of interests, and you find that at sometimes directors may have personal interests that are not alike or that may conflict with those of the company. And when this happens, remember the directors are the one that manages the company. So if their views or their interest conflicts with those of the company, this one leads to mismanagement. So conflicts of interest is also a disadvantage that is associated with a public limited company. The other disadvantage is the delay in decision making. And you find that in public limited companies, it takes a very, very long time before the shareholders and the directors have a meeting. Actually, in most of the companies that we have, especially in our country, meeting between the directors and the shareholders happens only once in a year. And therefore, you'll find that in case there is a major decision that needs to be made, it may take a very long time if it's a decision that involves or that has to involve both the directors and the shareholders. So such a decision would be very, very expensive and will be made after a very long period of time. So that's what we were saying. It leads to slow decision making, and it is also very, very expensive. The other disadvantage is these economies of scales, and these economies of scales are those disadvantages that are associated with big firms. So you find that most of the time public limited companies are usually big. They are huge companies, so they actually experience what you are referring to as these economies of scale. The effects of these economies of scale is high costs of production. So if a company has these economies of scale, that leads to high cost of running the company, which actually also results into inefficiency. It also results to inefficiency. So these economies of scale is a disadvantage. And we continue with its disadvantages, and the other one is the double taxation. And you find that if a company has actually has to announce what profit it has, the profit that it has generated in a given year. So that profit is actually taxed. Remember, the shareholders get dividends. They get dividends from the profit that is generated by the company. And what happens is that these dividends are also taxed. So you see, initially, the profit of the company is taxed. Then the dividends, that is the profit now being subdivided to the various shareholders, they are also taxed. That profit is also taxed. That profit, we refer to it as dividends. These dividends are also taxed. And therefore, that's why we are saying there is what we call double taxation. So what is being taxed now in form of dividends had already been taxed as an income. So that results to what we are calling double taxation. And therefore, that one is a disadvantage. That one is also a disadvantage. That marks the end of our lesson. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to review with some assignment here to better your understanding. So distinguish between a private limited company and a public limited company. This one actually requires you to just come up with the differences between a private limited company and a public limited company. It is also important to note that it's very good, even in the exams, even in the examinations, the writing examinations. Anytime you come across a question asking you to distinguish between this and that, it's usually advisable you use a table. Do it in tabular form. So we are going to review that during our next lesson, but I'm not leaving without giving you our business quote of the day. Our business quote of the day was given by someone by name Ifeanyi Onwoha, and says, working together as a team helps build a cohesive organization. Continue to watch and learn. You can give us your feedback.